This is episode 9 of the Brand Authority podcast. Today we're talking about kind of an uncomfortable subject, but such an important one: how to recover from a social media disaster. Stay tuned.
This is the Brand Authority Podcast, the show for growth-driven leaders who want to win more customers, increase revenue, and gain the competitive edge. Broadcasting from sunny Los Angeles, here's your host, Rebekah Radice.
Hello and welcome back to the Brand Authority Podcast. Thanks so much for taking time out of your day to be a part of our community and the conversation. So today we're talking about how to recover from a social media disaster. And I know that it's always an uncomfortable topic, one that when it comes up kind of makes you squirm a little bit because the last thing we want to think about is that horrible feeling reeling back from something that's transpired that it might have been well within our control or it might not have. But what we do have control over is how we respond, how we react or proactively take a stance within a crisis or within a disaster where instead of backpedaling, we're actually hitting it. And when I say hitting it, we are responding immediately without having to think about it, without hours, maybe even days going by before you're able to comment back. So let's avoid all of that today and talk about the steps you're going to take during that crisis. So what this becomes is actually your guideline within your companies. So even if it's just you, you're going to get crystal clear in how you're going to react, how you're going to respond to that situation. And then it's also going to act as really that plan for your team. So if you do have a larger team, or even if you just have one individual who's helping you manage social media, everybody needs to clearly understand what those first steps are, what that plan of action is, and they need to know it well in advance of a situation unfolding where, as I said, all of a sudden you're stuck backpedaling and trying to figure out how you respond, or do you even respond? And that's going to be my first bullet point, because that is just a can of worms all unto itself. So your first step is to assess the situation. And as I mentioned, social media is moving so fast and conversations are happening at a lightning pace. I know that I can turn around and have 100 new notifications on Twitter. So for you managing your own business, it can become very overwhelming to keep up. And when you see something negative, you can want to do that knee-jerk reaction immediately and respond. And so instead, we're going to take some time in this step number 1, and we're going to actually assess the situation. So instead of that quick response, I want you to look at that feedback and take a look at where that person is truly coming from, because not all negative feedback requires a reply. And let me explain exactly what I mean by that. So what you're looking for here is you kind of assess the landscape, see what's going on, see what's being talked about. You are identifying those who are directly affected immediately. So as a business, if let's say your app has gone down and people are complaining on Twitter and they're saying, hey, I can't access your app, or hey, I can't actually get to this feature. Take a look at how many tweets have you gotten within the last 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. Take a look at kind of the scope of what's going on. Now, in this situation, it becomes instantly clear what's going on. You should be able to see, is this an erroneous situation where somebody is maybe just a hater and they've gone on a commenting spree, or is this a a valid complaint, that you need to reach out to this person that may be affected by something that's gone on within your business. And so assessing that from a neutral position where you are not on the defensive, you are not overreacting, you're not allowing your emotions to run away from you, but just sitting in that neutral position, trying to get a lay of the land and really understand, okay, here's what's going on. Now you can think about how you're going to respond. So to those affected, I'm going to share with you in just a few minutes exactly how you're going to go about reaching out to all of these people. But I do want to bring it back to the negativity that can tend to happen on social media. And what I want to make sure is you don't get caught up in that swell of emotion that can draw you into negative conversations that you really don't need to be a part of. So we've seen it where there are those haters or those trolls that no matter what you do, they don't like it and they're never going to like it. And when you comment, what are you doing? You're just adding accelerant to that fire, and you are giving them more energy to keep coming back. And you've probably seen this in other conversations across social media where, good grief, they just keep coming and coming and coming, and there's never an end to what they have to say in response. So cut that off right from the beginning. Don't add that fuel to their fire. You never, ever, ever want to engage in a losing battle like that where nobody comes out a winner. So step 2 is maintaining control of your emotions. Dealing with the social media disaster, it can really take a toll on your emotions, especially if this is your business and you love your business, you love what you do, you honor your clients, you just absolutely adore your customers. Any negativity is going to feel like an attack. And so at this point, you really have to get your emotions in check. So for you and your team, before you sit down and start to write a response, choose to be in control of your emotions. That emotional climate of the situation, it's going to have everything to do with how you manage that situation. If you go in with guns blazing and you are immediately defensive, what's going to happen? That person is going to come back and feel threatened and frustrated, and they are going to respond in kind. Unlike the flip side of that, where if you come at it from a helpful, that attitude of gratitude of, oh, wow, thanks so much for letting us know, had no idea, let me get this taken care of right now. That attitude is going to spill into that person responding to you. Now, certainly this isn't going to work every single time. There are people that are going to choose to be upset no matter what. But just as they have their choices, you have yours as well. So choose to back that emotion out, come at it from that helpful place where all you want to do is take care of them, embrace the situation, and get this resolved as quickly as possible. Just as in any area of our life, self-control here is incredibly critical, and it really is the key to winning over your angry customer, your angry subscriber, user, whoever this person is. Eventually, what you're trying to come to is a peaceful resolution. So don't let the desire to win the argument in that exact moment overtake your emotions. Your third step is to acknowledge the negative feedback. There is nothing worse than watching a negative situation unfold on social media other than watching a one-sided conversation play out because nobody at the company, at the brand was actually paying attention. I know you have seen this, and it's truly painful to watch because there is that tendency to pile on social media. When one person has something negative to say, others are going to start attacking and piling on, especially if you haven't come back and actually acknowledged the situation. So don't let that be you. As you respond, make sure to acknowledge how the person is feeling. Empathy plays such a critical role in all of this, where you empathize with the current situation. And of course, we talk a lot about transparency and authenticity within your responses. And if you don't truly empathize, people are going to sniff that out. You need to truly come at it from that place of, wow, I really get where you're at. I understand your frustration, and I am simply here to help you resolve this situation. So in other words, no matter the size of your company, you have to be human. You have to humanize your company. You have to humanize your brand, humanize your voice and your responses to truly feel their pain. And as I said, do it in a very transparent way. One of my good friends, Brian Honigman, who is the owner of Honigman Media, he suggests that honesty truly is the best policy. And I couldn't agree with him more. He says, craft a genuine apology and share it with your audience. And then he goes on to warn that a blanket response, so where you see that situation where they've just copied and pasted a response, it absolutely sends the wrong message. So if you're receiving a lot of messages related to the crisis, you want to go through and you want to address each of those personally. So don't do a blanket response to everybody and say, hey, everybody, we know you're having a problem. No, reach out to every single person that's messaged you on Facebook, that's tweeted you on Twitter, and let them know what your plan of attack is. Let them know what's happening right now, what you're doing to resolve this situation. I see too often that too many businesses, they go silent. You clam up, you don't know what to do, you panic, you freak out, you run around your kitchen a few times, or you run around your office a few times, and you are just beside yourself trying to figure out how to respond. And so instead, you just send out that generic response. Well, it comes off as very emotionless. It comes off as very uncaring, which of course are the exact opposite feelings you want to impart during a crisis or a disaster. Next up, you want to keep the conversation focused. It is really important to focus the conversation on the real problem. As I mentioned before, there are going to be situations where you're going to have a lot of back and forth, where you'll explain and they'll come back with another question, or you'll answer that question and they'll come back with another frustration. And your goal is to keep the conversation focused on the real problem as opposed to a perceived issue or getting lost over in the weeds of what could be another issue, but it's not the topic at hand. So understand clearly what's gone on, what's transpired, and then how your company is working to rectify or eliminate that from happening again. So let's say you're a web service provider and your hosting just went down and you have a bunch of people that are angry that their websites aren't up right now. They're not online. And this means that every second that their website isn't up, they're losing money. Well, that's going to be a pretty heated conversation. So you need to be prepared to have those conversations and keep that conversation focused. So this goes back to having an escalation policy in place, a guideline in place, so that when those do happen, happen, you know exactly who to contact. You know exactly what that process for resolution looks like. So you can clearly articulate that to those affected, and you can do it very quickly so that there's not minutes lost where they feel as if there is a situation where you're hiding behind your social channels, you're not being transparent in what's going on, and then that frustration builds from there, and it can quickly get out of control. A colleague of mine, Mike Alton, who is the chief officer at SightCell, says this is the exact situation where he sees so many companies get into hot water. He says it's easy to know when you're in trouble, but difficult to know why you're in trouble. Take a few moments to get to the root of the cause or the issue. Your response will be more appropriate and better received. And that's such a great point because it goes back to what we were talking about in crafting a specific response where it's going to be better received if they know that this is specific to their problem. This is specific to what's going on with them right now. And it lets them know that they have a voice, that they've been heard, that you actually listened and took the time to reach back out to them and let them know what's going on. So it truly does create that bridge between you and your audience, that communication bridge that's not just going to create that communication bridge today, but for weeks and months and years to come as you build trust. Your next step is to always work to find a resolution. And I've touched on this just a little bit, but let's think about this. We're all human, right? And everybody has a bad day. So what you have to remember is that you have the power and the ability to turn that bad day around for somebody else. It's both in the words that you say and so important that people are paying attention to the ones that you don't say. You know, sometimes your customer, they're angry because they feel slighted. Could be that no one has responded to a previous tweet or a post. So maybe you have a team and one of your team members kind of fell down on the job and didn't respond. And so now that you look at it, it's been 5, 6, maybe 7 hours of time that has gone by since somebody responded. So it's now your job. It's incumbent upon you to not only reach out, but come at it from that apologetic tone, from that place of empathy, as we talked about, and then also let them know that your job is to find a resolution ASAP. Now, on the other side of this, as I said, we're all human. So what they're venting about may or may not have something to do with you. They've just decided that they're frustrated with something going on with you, your business, with your app. And now all of a sudden, they've decided to take their bad day out on you. So it is important that you also look at it from that lens that, yeah, sometimes we just have a bad day and we need somebody to listen. We need somebody to vent on. And maybe we work alone and we don't have a spouse sitting around and we don't have friends that we can pick up the phone and complain to. So understand too that sometimes people just need grace. They need grace and they need space and they need an empathetic ear to be able to work through those issues. Your next step is to over-communicate and always, always, always follow up. So while saying the right thing, and we've talked a little bit about that, is very important, updating that customer is equally as important because there's nothing worse than a situation going on and no follow-up. So all of a sudden they felt like, oh, wow, they've embraced, the situation. They're working on it. They're getting back to me. They've responded. And then all of a sudden, crickets. Nobody is giving updates. Nobody's getting back with them. We just recently, I'm in the Los Angeles area, and we had a situation where we had one of the largest fires about 2.5 miles away from me in the history of Los Angeles. And a bizarre situation where the media was just wonderful in letting everybody know what was going on. And then all of a sudden, they just really went dark. And Twitter blew up, frustrated that we weren't getting updates. So remember that it is important to immediately respond and have that plan of communication, but also equally important that you have a system in place to come back and actually follow up with them. So whether it's on Facebook, maybe it's on Twitter, those are the top 2 locations where most people are going to not only get their information when there is a crisis or a disaster, but also where they're going to respond negatively when something unfortunate does happen. So circle back to that social channel where they actually reached out to you. And in the end, just know that with a disaster or a crisis, there is always a price. You're not going to be able to save every single customer. You're not going to be able to make every single client or user happy based off of the situation or your resolution. But what you can do is proactively decide on how your company will manage those expectations and provide the highest level of customer care no matter the situation. And all of this comes down to the planning. So really sitting down with your team, and if it's just a team of you, sitting down and thinking through all 6 of these steps to be able to clearly articulate what the situation is, how you're proactively working to resolve the situation, how you're going to back your emotions out so you don't come at it from a defensive stance right off the bat, and then how you're going to follow up, and then what you're going to do to consistently re-engage that audience and ensure that that situation never happens again. And if it does and it's out of your control, well, you're right back at it and you're apologetic and you are sympathetic to what's going on and you're fixing it as best you can within your abilities. So to wrap up, as I said, social media disasters, they are going to happen. So better for you to plan ahead to know exactly how you're going to respond rather than reeling back and being totally frustrated or your whole day derailed because you weren't prepared to be able to handle a situation just like this. You know, a few years ago, I had an email malfunction, which happened, in the early morning hours Pacific time, which is what I am. And by the time I woke up, unfortunately, I had hundreds of emails from frustrated people that had gotten multiple emails from me. And so in that situation, what could I have done? Well, I could have had it scheduled to go out when I was awake or one of my team members was awake. I could have ensured that somebody was monitoring that at all times. I could have made sure that somebody was online at that time so could quickly respond. So many things I could have done much, much better. So you don't have to learn the hard way. You don't have to learn by your mistakes. You can put that proactive plan in place so that when it does happen, and it will, it happens to everybody, you are more than prepared. Thanks again for listening to the Brand Authority Podcast. And today I wanted to share with you a little gift that I give away here on the Brand Authority Podcast. And if you haven't taken advantage of it already, make sure and download your copy of my daily social media checklist. You can find that in the show notes as well as on the blog post. It is free to you and a great way to focus your energy and attention on the right actions every single day. I've also included any other resources I mentioned in the show notes and also on the blog, so never hard for you to find anything that I've discussed. And as always, if you have a topic or a question you'd like me to focus on or answer in an upcoming show, all you have to do is email my team at marketing@RebekahRadice.com. Until next time, look forward to seeing you online and back here for another episode of the Brand Authority Podcast.